to have fun? Okay, I'm gonna ask one question. How many of you have a great idea or project at work and you're worrying about failing?
I do.
You know? All right. So you are in the right place. So my name is Dr. Jimmy Godard. Some of you may know who I am, and some of you do not have any idea who this guy is. I'm the new kid on the block. I think I'm the newest board member for SIM, correct, Madam President? All right, so she says yes. So my job is Director of Programs. So I'm here to put up programs for all of you to have fun. And guess what? Thank you. I only have one friend. So I have a great team. It's me, myself, and I. So having said that, if I'm gonna put a great event for all of you, guess what I need? Anybody can guess? Validation and help. I need help. And over there? Oh, I need to show up. Yes. I need to show up. And believe me, I do not want anybody to use me as an example of this as well. So, having said that, if you guys interested in doing something big, something exciting, please reach out to me. There's a very extensive vetting process that probably requires some coffee or happy hour. Please let me know, and I'll be more delighted to really work with you so that we can do something special. Pradeep told me this is no, I can do whatever I want. That's what he said. So, all right. Exactly. So, in order for us not to experience failing, whether backward, forward, or sideways, I'm going to invite a great moderator. This gentleman, I get to know him very recently. We're working together on the board of SIM. He has moved so fast and rapidly, moving from an acquaintance, a colleague, to a friend. He means what he says. If you need help, he will jump all over the place to really help you. So I can understand why our state is so green, because he's the CIO of the Oregon Department. Okay, DEQ. This is not where you go take your car. You know what? I have a problem over there. The Oregon Department Environment Quality, right? Did I get that right? In addition to that, he also teaches. He's an adjunct professor at University of Portland. All right. And if you are a bookworm, guess what? He is also our director of education, where he has a book club. Very great book. As a matter of fact, I've been I'm going to be honest with you, reluctant joining SIM, but guess what? The books are very great, and also Pradeep will not stop harassing me, so here I am. But this is a great organization. I'm making so many appendices already. So I'm very happy to introduce all of you to Travis, Lucky, and believe me, you're lucky. Travis.
This is your last chance to get the desserts that are sitting out there. So if you want to, any intention of getting dessert, now's the time. Right? Before we sit down.
All right, well, this is perfect. Well, everyone's distracted.
I'm still here.
Do we have our presentation? This would be a really good time for us to transition. Yeah. And maybe figure out how to make this happen. Let's go. Let's go.
Do you have a
Yes.
ways of looking?
Yeah, she's got it. No. Let's see here. The presentation.
It's on that. It's fine.
This is great. This is great. That means one extra. No, you got it. That's all right. We're on break anyway.
Are you guys driving to Disney? It's a long drive. How old are your kids?
17.
Oh, well, they're older. Wow.
I'm going to get started while you guys just hammer the quick with it. Hey everyone, I hope you got dessert and I hope you got coffee. We're going to get started. Presentation will just fade in as time and when it's time. But we don't need it to start with introductions. So I'm going to introduce the panel. I'll let the panel introduce themselves. Let's see, Kimberly, I see your eyes, which means you're ready. Why don't you go first?
Yeah, my name's Kim. Yes, thank you. I actually teach high school choir, and I taught 10 years at the elementary level, and so I know it's probably kind of weird for me to be here, but this is my 13th year in education, and I've done some mentorship of young teachers and soon-to-be teachers, and Travis and I have been friends a long time. Right now I'm at Silverton High School. I was in Beaverton before that. and Bend, Oregon, and my degrees are from U of O and PSU. And yeah, go Ducks, that's right. Woo! So that's me. My name is Kim. If you call me Kimberly, I'll think I'm in trouble or something. So, or my mom is calling. So that's me. I'll pass it off now.
Hi, my name is Dharma. I am currently a senior engineer, DevOps engineer at a company called Redox. My background is in healthcare technology. I used to work at Epic, a lot of you know Epic. And my academic background is in physics, but that was a big failure. I'm in healthcare technology. I'm a friend of Travis's for about 8 years now, and I think that you'll find that is the common denominator.
All right, I'm Leif Anderson. I'm a mental health therapist. I've been doing that for about 10 years. Before that, construction between undergrad and grad school. I degrees from University of Washington and a little place called the Leadership Institute of Seattle. And I moved down to Portland. And I think, friends with Travis. Brings a different perspective to the IT thing. I am familiar with Epic.
All right, hi, my name's Brandon Gatke, longtime SIM member. Yes, I've known Travis for probably, we have 15 years now. Yes, one of our masters. So anyway, currently the CIO and now the interim VP of Finance and Administration for Pacific University, Liberal Arts and Health Sciences over at Forest Grove and Hillsborough. So looking forward to sharing what has worked, what has not worked, and what has continued to not work, but yet we keep trying it anyway. So yes, fail and learn, right? That's the goal. So looking forward to it.
Thanks, everybody. And what you've gotten a sense of is where this whole concept came from. I have probably talked to at least a quarter of the people in this room about failure over the last 9 months or so, as I've just kind of been thinking about the topic. And the fact that usually in settings just like this, with people just like me, and a podium just like this, you hear about like a framework or a success story and the way that you ought to do something so that you can go to work on Monday and do it that way. And eventually there will be profit or success or whatever it is you're working towards. And in a lot of those things, I've tried that a lot. I've been a member of SIM for quite a long time. I've read a lot of keynotes, a lot of different venues, and I've tried a lot of different things that I've learned, and some of them have stuck. Most of them haven't. And I've wished more and more folks would talk about, you know what, it doesn't necessarily work this way every time. Here's some thoughts to consider, but you know more about your organization than we do. And so I was hoping we talk about this other thing, like what happens when it doesn't go the way that it ought to, and the fact that we don't talk about it very much at all. We lose sleep. I was just talking to somebody earlier today in line for lunch about the fact that we lose sleep over it. We talk to ourselves about it all the time. It's not my words, it's somebody else's. And in fact, most of the things I'm going to say today have come from lots and lots of conversations about failure. And the fact that we pick up, we sift through the ashes, we move forward, and ultimately, here we all are, as a technology leadership organization. But we all have this personal experience with it. And so this panel, lots of conversations with everybody here over a long time. They all have a lot of really good thoughts and insight and very different perspective. I also didn't want a panel of people from this room talking to people in this room about the things that we all do every day. The different perspectives, different ways of looking at and thinking about things is so valuable. So that's kind of how we got here. I hope you have a good time. Let's see. So we've got one of our 4 questions, the seed questions, which was, what are you expecting to hear today? I'd love if you'd like to raise your hand and share. And if you wouldn't, that's fine. We've made you write it down already, so I'm just going to read off the board. Any volunteers? What do you expect to hear today?
We can fluff it off the board, Travis. It's a really high value question asking people to raise their hand. First time in a setting. So some people are, I found this one particularly interesting. It says another crisis. So like we've all had some serious trauma here over the last few years. Is failing such a thing? These are really interesting. Ways to improve skills as leaders, how to fail forward with new technologies, how to fail up, what a healthy relationship full failure looks like, how other people solve their challenges. That failing often can be a great source of growth and success if framed properly. Not totally sure. Like, I'm here for the drinks, okay? And then ways to improve our skills. So kind of a range there. I'm wondering if anyone is open to like elaborate, if they maybe put one or didn't get to that and then was able to go.
Richard.
So, yeah, Richard, because I walked into the room and I was told you've got these questions to answer. So I walk over to the board and it says, what do you expect to hear today? And I'm looking at it from the perspective of I walk into work, what do I expect to hear? Which is why I said another crisis, because that's what we typically do. So that was the only qualification. It wasn't the same thing I expected another crisis. Although I am on call, but yes. Good luck. That's what we do. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Anything else? Anything that's not on the board that someone was thinking about? All right. Well, that's great. One thing that I heard that we're not planning to talk about is how to fail up, which is how, despite not being good at the work that you do, you just move up in the management. That's not one of the themes. Although, there's enough people in this room. I'm sure there's a lot of experts in that too. Don't okay, so let's move forward. So tonight we're going to explore the experience of failure, how we experience failure, and how we think about failure. We're going to look at how it relates to obstacles, decisions, mistakes, and commitment. Those 4 categories are how we've kind of broken up the content. We all know that we can learn from mistakes, and yet we still fear failure, and we still tend to shy away from it. And that fear and that shame blocks the learning and blocks the growth that we know is there, but we hold ourselves back. So tonight we're going to talk about it and see if we can't take the edge off. We do not have a framework we're going to be presenting. We're just going to be talking about this concept that, again, 100% of the people here have done it a lot. Like, we're all experts. We've all done the 10,000 hours of failure already. So it's more about having a conversation and making it a little bit more comfortable to think about and kind of lean into. Okay, so we've got an awesome panel. We've got an awesome audience. We've got food in our bellies. Why don't we, mostly in our bellies, dessert's on its way. Getting there. And why don't we dive in? Okay, so we've all heard give a person a fish to for a day, teach them to fish for a lifetime. This entrepreneurship proverb takes it to the next level, which is teach someone to fail and they'll innovate global food distribution. So they're not just feeding themselves, they're feeding everyone. I'd love to hear from the panel, what your thoughts are about this. What do you think this means?
I have a thought that I'd like to share before we go too deeply.
Yeah.
Just because I just want to say one thing, that we're trying to ask people here to be a little bit we haven't set any meeting agreements of everyone is agreeing to be open and vulnerable, but we're going to ask people to try a little because there are some interaction that will really help this feeling. And to acknowledge for a minute here how risky that is as adults to maybe share out and tell our feelings to another person because of fear of judgment or imposter syndrome, which I felt on another way, or fearing to be wrong. And so I hope that people can, even if we haven't all agreed and gotten to know each other and held hands and say kumbaya, but that we can have a moment of maybe you whisper something to a neighbor, or even think it in your head on a few questions that come up, which is a really difficult thing, but will eventually create more trust among people in your group and in your organization. So I'm going to try and really encourage this from me to you. I do not know you. You have no reason to trust me or Travis, really. You gotta not watch out for this guy. Makes you want to talk to people in weird places. But to just really go for it. And that's why I want to start with this activity as a low impact, try and begin. So I think this one is starting to go. Oh, there it goes. So teach someone to fail, they will innovate global food distribution. That sounded wrong. Distribution. So if you guys have some thoughts on that, now would be the time. You guys go first. And then anyone else who wants to go too.
Can you see why I broke the panel the way I did, by the way? This is great. And honestly, those boards behind you, like this was an idea from Kim. Like, what if we created a way for people to engage more? Like, this is how this whole thing came together, and everything we're going to talk about tonight. Like, I can take very little credit for. So thank you, Kim, and please keep it up. RJ, yeah, thoughts.
So you can never let any good crisis go to waste. We found out, hopefully from the pandemic, that a lot of the obstacles that we usually would have feared is like, no, we now have an over singular priority. Do X, Y, Z to survive whatever is happening or however the pandemic impacted your workforce. And one of the many failures we had from that in higher ed, not all students got to learn the same way. Well, we were so proud of ourselves. In that first 3 weeks, we turned it around. We had 3,500 students online, 1,000 faculty. Mazel tov, have a cookie. 40% of them did really bad. They were just voted in because they're like, what do I do here? It's like, okay, let's get you graduated. But it was still an opportunity to steal something from Google, which is relentless incrementals. We melted down all of these academic, not silos, cylinders of excellence. I'm stealing that from OHSU because the cylinders open at the top and the bottom, so I'm totally stealing that. And what that allows you to do, but we failed quite a bit to get there. Relentless incrementalism is now the end result because we know, let's try something for a little bit. Didn't work, okay, we learned, go on and on. But we reinvigorated how we accommodate our students now. We actually offer hybrid teaching. We've scaled it back a little bit. We're not doing it as fully robust. You know, maybe 2 students show up online, but we just spent 20 hours prepping for that. No, we maybe do a little bit more. We set that realistic expectation. We learned from those failures. We're still learning. We're still failing quite a bit in that area because our student needs have changed too. But it has really helped our faculty and has released them from these uninteresting kind of pedagogical methods that they used to have and have teams. Let's do something new. Let's do something crazy. And it's okay to do that. They're not going to fail somebody. It's not going to be so bad that somebody is really hopefully going to hurt themselves. Unless you're in health sciences, don't do that. But the good point, do it with the trusting environment. So I would say that's what has helped us most recently. Don't let a good crisis go to waste, and then hope to God you got the feedback mechanism to learn from when they did that.
Thank you, Brandon. Any other thoughts on this? And no, you're not obligated.
I should say, like, in my field, in mental health, you know, I can almost sum up like why people come into my office because they're locked up because they don't often they're struggling with how to learn from failure, right? It's like that's a lot of what I'm trying to do. The second part, right? Not just teach somebody to fish, not just like the how to do something, but like to back up, take a bigger perspective, you know, see and to take that setback or whatever, you know, you call it failure maybe, but like and learn from that, which might not even be to learn that specific thing, but more generally, almost how to take we have to call it feedback, the feedback that you're getting from things not working out the way you expected them to, right? So I think one of the things I've been thinking about this thing is that there's an idea called the holographic universe, right? Where things operate on a small scale and then they're expanded into large scale, and some of the same principles apply no matter what scale it's at, no matter how many times you divide it. And I think that's true here with individuals. This is true about like learning to fail, like learning to deal with when things don't go as you expected or wanted them to. And the same is true for organizations, right? And the same kinds of things that get in your way, like Travis mentioned shame. That's a big thing with individuals. It comes up a lot. If I help people work on their sense of shame when something hasn't gone their way, it makes a huge difference. That's one of my favorite interventions is just to cut the word should out of your vocabulary, because should has this shaming, this moral implication. So it's just like use any other word. Any other word is better than that word. And I think that carries. We might not call it shame as an organization, but that same feeling carries it along and stops people, right? So I take that as like that's what it means to learn how to fail. Is how to deal with the emotional response that comes up, right? How do I deal with that and keep moving, like find a different path? So.
Just I think the subtext here is that we all know how to fail. Failure is very complex, universal to us, but having a healthy, productive relationship with failure is kind of key to us succeeding as individuals for as an organization. And I do think this is another case where we have we're probably here in an environment where we do actually know the why for this, but we don't know the how, or we lack pointers on the how. This is another great example. And so I hope, today we can kind of like center on the how. I think I speak for myself, but definitely I expect this is true from my colleagues here too. We're not better at failure or have a healthier relationship with failure than the rest of you. So we're really looking to just kind of be prompters for this conversation.
Wonderful, thank you, everybody. Yeah, and you might have heard the concept of growth mindset. It's been in some workbooks in the club. All of the TED Talks and whatnot. This is a part of that. Learning how to accept when failure happens and to learn and grow from it, and to not think of yourself as a failure. That's the shame. But rather, boy, this didn't go the way we hoped. Let's kind of pick up and figure out where to go next and see if we can maybe not do that again. That's the growth mindset. So thank you, everybody. This was great. Okay, now we're going to our first of the 4 categories that we'll be talking about. We're going to dig into obstacles. And here we had a prompt question. Oh, we didn't do that. Yeah, sorry. I got it. Oh, thank you. Yeah, but see all the backup lines? We've got some backups on backups. Obstacles. So we have a prompt question related to this. What are some feelings you experience when you hit a roadblock or an obstacle? If I can get a volunteer, yes, thank you, Leif.
It's over there.
Backups. So you want to pick a few that kind of resonate with you, and then we'll see if anyone wants to raise their hand, either like share more about it or volunteer.
All right, so what do we got on here? Like anger, frustration, exhaustion. It's a question like when you come to a roadblock, determined. So it's interesting. I gotta say, I want to say something which, I was looking at some of these earlier. I'm impressed with some of these, with what people put on here. I was expecting a lot more negative, negative feelings. And there's a frustration that's mentioned a bunch of times, but it's determined. So there's like it's not, there's a response to the roadblock that's like, there's another determined. There's a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, but this is interesting. Anger or excited.
Okay.
I think,
or both at the same time.
and I think that's an important, right? It's not just one thing. We don't have like, we can have, and they can have contradicting emotional response, right? It's like, we can feel 2 totally different things. We can be anxious and excited. So, oh no, not again. We're going to quote from Checkers and Guide and Gals. Imposter syndrome. See, I usually feel intrigued or excited. I love a challenge, right? So this is like one of those already this like attitude of like, oh, I see this obstacle. What can I do with it?
Yeah. So correct me on this though, Leif. Like that's usually how I approach things, especially on the outside. Like when my kids struggle with the math test, or I have a hard day at work. Like if I'm talking about it at the dinner table, it's always about it's gonna be okay. Here's why. And I just default to that. Like that is how I present. Even though on the inside, like I'm withering in a little way. And so I wonder, and I guess I ask, and you don't have to raise your hand, but like, we want to present as determined and problem solvers and committed. We're going to survive. We are survivors. Is that how it actually feels, or do you still lose sleep?
So one of the things I'll say about this from psychology, there's a primary emotional response, primary emotional response, right? So there's like, you hit the roadblock, and what's the first thing you feel? And, generally that's going to be something, probably frustration, anger, fear, I'm scared, I don't know what's happening. And the important thing is often you can't help that response. The primary response actually happens before you're consciously aware of it. 0.2 seconds before you're aware of it. So we often talk about like, you can't help that, right? But you can help how you respond to it. So then that's like the secondary emotional response, and then we keep going, third, fourth. But the secondary one is like, after you've had a moment, you think about it, right? So that's probably often where like determined comes from, this, or excited, or like, oh, I like a challenge, right? It's like, so I'm wondering, if you could kind of step back for a moment from maybe your trained reaction that Travis was talking about, the secondary reaction, to that primary reaction. It's that very first thing that you feel.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so one thing that I've noticed is I tend to default to action. So I'll jump right in, try to solve a problem, I'm gonna fix it. That has not been effective when it's a big failure. I'm realizing leaning into the pain and actually really feeling what's the stress, what's it all about, what's the failure, and like being sad usually by myself is the best. Actually not talking to people and just letting that soak in, because I won't make the right decision if I really don't identify what really went wrong. And so now I try to lean into the pain and stop problem solving, because I feel like I fail if I try to problem solve too quickly.
Yeah, that's really great, Mike. Thank you for sharing with that. That was super awesome. And like, one reason I think this is kind of like a leadership forum here, but like being that having that feeling as a leader, and how do we allow the people who we're in charge of to have that moment of humanness before you try and fix the freaking thing that broke, or whatever it is, like allowing that moment of human. And you're not going to get away from being human. I so wish we could sometimes, but like, that's such a really good comment of like recognizing even in each person how they must feel. And there's different quadrants of feelings for anyone who's done their work on social emotional learning. That's a whole topic for a different day. But like knowing how severe and like how your feelings can correspond to how difficult the roadblock is and when you shut down for that.
Okay. Parallel, those in IT here, when you have an outage, there tends to be some system down emergency, public facing, got lines out your door, your phone's ringing off the hook, you want to just get it fixed right away. And I'll credit CTO of Zoom Care at the time, his name's Dave Cole, years ago, major EMR outage, and everybody was panicked. And because we had clinics and patient care impacted, I know you know a lot about that experience, Brandon. And well, actually, and also Dharma, that's kind of your industry too. And I don't remember if he used a dad voice, but somehow he got the attention of like everybody in the room, in the area, who was frantically trying to reboot things and get things working, and so everyone just stop, away from the keyboard. And we need to go quick here, that's true, but to do that, we need to slow down. We need to reflect. Think about where we're at, like what have we seen, like what was the stuff that happened right before the outage, and just take your time. No one's in a hurry. Anyone outside of this group who's in a hurry, I'm gonna have them talk to me, direct them to me. I'm gonna absorb that. You guys take your time. And boy, it just changed everything about the way, in that instance, and those that followed, we responded and resolved it. It meant so much. Yeah, awesome, okay. So, we're going to move forward.
Unless anyone else has anything they want to share, or even share with the neighbor.
Yeah, please.
Well, I think what you were just talking about that is inherent to a lot of this discussion is, culture. And, I've been a part of organizations where, the culture doesn't support failure or learning from failure. And, it can be quite the opposite. And there's been part of cultures where it's absolutely embrace failure. You learn from failure and fail fast. And so I think for what we're talking about here, we all have feelings, but what you do with those feelings really can many times depend on the culture in which you work.
Yeah, it's so insightful. And I think a lot of us in the room, like we have an ability, even if you don't on the org chart, you're not responsible for the team culture. Like, you can lead by example, you can give feedback where possible, and then try to lead into to create that environment. 100% of people deserve to work in an environment where they don't have shame and fear of every mistake, because everybody makes mistakes. And if ultimately that's not something possible, like that's We've got some great people here from ProFocus and a number of other companies who will help you find the jobs.
Comment on that, I think specifically for gender for women, and women are judged more harshly around gender. And that's just statistically there. So, and you add that to the fact that in general, we're our biggest critics. Our minds do work differently than men. So I would tell you that first, I usually feel disappointment. So you, as we all learned how to condition ourselves and we take things into response, but at the end of the day, usually what it starts with myself is disappointment. You know, and then you start going through that process of what could I have done differently. Like instead of naturally, I think you can objectively and subconsciously start to talk through what could I have done. This is a learning, you know, situation. In my family, we call things tuition. So, you know, you loan someone money, which later on in life is really a gift. So, you know, tuition. You make an investment with a friend, tuition, right? I mean, so we call those things tuition in our lives, right? To start changing that perspective on life lessons.
I wanted to add something with this culture, because I think the culture of an organization can make a huge difference in what an individual does with the feelings from the roadblock or the failure, right? And that can make the difference between whether it gets seen as a challenge that you can overcome or whether it becomes an impact, an impasse that they can't go past. Because, and part of like going back to like what happens to an individual, right? It's like, it's often it's those sort of, it's on that negative side. The obstacle gets seen, with, I can't do that or can't go through. And the leadership is in charge of creating that culture that says, oh, I can look at this differently, right? That helps people get out of that initial reaction. Our brains, like we're three times more likely to look at things in a negative light than a positive light. So that's like, it takes that culture can make a huge difference in getting to that, that 1/3, 1/4 of our mindset that allows us to keep going. So, really
Awesome. So, please.
From a culture standpoint, as leaders, we don't allow people to fail. They don't take on those big obstacles later. They don't want those projects. They don't want that failure over them, so they don't even try. Yeah, it's really bad.
Yeah, right. And then that is a multiplier effect in a culture. With everyone in that culture operating with that mindset, the future is not bright for anybody, personally or professionally.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
David, I think the oldest guy in the room. So I got a few years of experience. I'll just add to what you said. The blame culture that exists in a lot of organizations keeps people from trying something. Because if they fail, they get blamed. If something goes wrong, many organizations look for the person who caused the problem, and that's the problem, the person. I worked in one organization, I tried to foster it in a few others that I led, but one where that really worked, where we wanted people to fail. We wanted them to try. And if they failed, we wanted them to tell other people what went wrong. Because if you make a mistake and you keep it to yourself, maybe you learn something, but nobody else learned from it, which means you make a mistake, Travis, and you don't tell me about it, I can make that mistake. But if you share it, that's just words of wisdom from a guy that's been around the block.
And this is why I love this subject so much. We've just gotten started and we're about halfway through our time, which is, this is great. The intention was for this to be a conversation and to make it something we're okay, comfortable, okay thinking about and talking about. Yeah, Sergey.
So the most important thing, again, being on the cutting edge of innovation, say from Bell Bank, although collapsed.
Literally cutting.
Too soon?
What else? fear kills innovation. First of all. So if you are hoping to have an organization, 10%, 20%, or 100% dedicated to innovation, as Silicon Valley Bank once was, you have to eliminate the fear. Right? Obstacles will always be there. There will be always challenges. But it's all about creating the nourishing environment where failing is safe. Just leave it at that.
So Travis, before we move on, because what we're all discussing here, you'll see how it interweaves into the other 4 quadrants. What we've all discussed is if you've got a safe place to fail, fantastic. It's probably built on trust. And one of my favorite books that broke me down to the level of an infant and should have been read in an afternoon, but took me a month, was called The Speed of Trust. Granted, the end result of that is for sales and how to increase comfort and blah, blah, blah. But it really depends on your locus of control and your locus of you trust yourself. And how can you trust yourself? Then how can you trust the group that's around you? And then if you find you are in a low trust environment, there's a productivity tax. That's where the fear comes in. That's where the shame comes in. So if you can fail fast and fail smart, I hope you have some great trust where you can instill that trust. But then again, if you're at a startup, you've only got 6 weeks of cash to go and put that product out, yeah, you're going to burn out probably spectacularly, but maybe it'll help with the next startup that you're at. True story. So yeah, but I say trust is one of those key components that you'll see interwoven elsewhere.
So Charlie, I have a question. I mean, let's talk about real case scenario. I mean, this is all lovely, right? But when you get to work, you face a failure and there's a cost to it.
Yeah.
How do we manage that cost? I was reading a book, don't quote me on that. I think an employee making a mistake, Bill Gates, Microsoft, Bill Gates was the CEO then, and the cost was about, I think about $500,000. So don't quote me on that number. So I think it was around that number. And somebody asked Bill Gates, are you going to fire this employee? Bill Gates responded, I just paid $500,000 to train this employee. Why should I fire that employee? Right? So having said that, at the same time, some of us deal with regulators, some of us deal with health. That a mistake, right? You can say you can try something, you fell forward, but there's a high price to pay for it. As an organization, how do you evaluate that price tag with employees feeling, free to innovate? And what type of mechanism or framework you can put around that so that people can feel free to innovate in sandboxes where it will not impact with production, right? If an employee goes right here and try to innovate with, neon lights and electricity goes down, we're not gonna be happy. That employee is gonna have to pay a cost for that. So.
Yeah, I think that's actually the most interesting part of this problem, is understanding concretely, like, what do you do? In, the DevOps evolution has been really around, like, how do we actually implement practices and technology to make failure small? Like, there are failure that feels big, and there's failure that, there are obstacles that feel small. How do we move things from the big category to that small category? And technically, we can do that via, like, building fault tolerant systems, making systems as small as possible, as atomic as possible. But in culture, I think that happens by tolerating fault, and that being reflected in your practices as an organization, but also building in that fault tolerance in a procedural way. Like, one person can't be the only subject matter expert at your company for something that is critical. You need to build in that fault tolerance, culturally, in the practice, in your day-to-day practices. I think nowadays failure to me most of the failure that I interact with feels very, very small and not a big deal, because we've kind of spent the overhead time to build the systems in place to shrink the impact.
And it goes right into, if Travis keeps going here with his clicker. Okay. But what Jimmy's getting at, because he must have read the slides in advance, he's such a good student. But these are decisions you have to make too, and with the obstacles, it just goes right in. If you keep going, the point that Jimmy's making about, this is with decisions with the next one. It really is the next step here. Like, what's the next?
Okay.
Go back to the question though.
Okay.
Yeah, what does it feel like to have an idea overridden by your boss? But I think if we even expand on that, Travis, and I know you have a bunch of notes and he's gonna be mad and make me do something later to pay for it, but like, what if you're overridden, or you know you're gonna have a regular up your butt about something, right? You know, like, this is a big deal, this is true, right? And how do you make that decision to evaluate this sort of mistake culture where mistakes are proof you're trying? It means you care, right? And so, how do you make decisions then that evaluate? And you get through these obstacles. You have to have an obstacle or it's the easy road. That was one of the quotes that you put up. But then how do we make these calls where you're like, we need to make people feel trusted, supported, valued in their work? Because most people that we work with are not making mistakes on purpose, like a big mistake, failing on purpose. It's from a goal, you're trying. So maybe Brandon or someone wants to read from some of our things that we put up.
Introduce this one.
Your mistake
Thank
culture.
you, Kim, for also helping us with the program.
Yeah, I'm real good at pushing people right here. What you want to talk about?
Let's see, where's the boss?
Mistakes are the, yeah.
We're doing the boss, right?
Yeah.
All right, and so first of all, somebody says it depends on how it was overridden.
What is the question?
The question is, what does it feel like to have an idea overridden by your boss? So it depends on how it was overridden, a very nuanced response. Again, another depends, there's a whole bunch of depends. It depends on if there's a why presented for the overwriting. There's a lot of feeling invisible, feeling like it could disappear, being discouraged. There's like, I'll let you know as soon as my boss actually does have a better idea.
I brought that one from home.
And I came up with that first, what the fuck? So actually a lot of nuanced kind of responses.
I think that's important that it's nuanced because it is super nuanced, like these decisions.
Yeah, all right, wonderful, thank you. Anything to add? We have now moved on into the decisions category. We do have a couple of takeaways, but before we get there, I'd love to hear more from the audience. Yes, please.
I don't know if mine fell off. I said I'll do the next one. It was more an idea that I've been in a company where I know I'm trusted to make decisions and failures. So if I don't get my idea across the first time, I will do it the next time and I'll keep trying until I'm heard.
Yeah. Trust based all.
And my boss is over there, so.
I was thinking about trust with Jimmy's question on, like, what if you can't fail because the stakes are too high and there's all of these external third-party folks keeping an eye on you and holding you accountable. And I think yes, that's true. Like, that's a terrible environment. But if over time you could build that environment and build more trust, that there were probably signals and signs earlier on that were indicating there were issues that, because it's a low trust environment now, you couldn't talk about. So it's just like, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna stay up really late. I'm gonna get to work at 4 a.m. tomorrow, and we're gonna figure out how to have this launch date. And so if the trust is there, that's the antidote to a lot of these problems. Yeah, Sasha.
I think shared responsibility is also important. So what I would tell you is, coming from a sales leadership perspective, right, you're not going to have somebody new try out, like, it's I call it a high risk situation or opportunity. This is a large client, strategic client. You're not going to put somebody new into that scenario. You basically align them with the right team so that there's that, they have the best opportunity in showing well in that situation. So I do believe in a team being paramount, and I think it's harder to hide also when you basically have a team. So low risk is fine doing an individual thing. High risk, the higher risk, the higher the visibility for the consumer forward to create a team that you've got multiple perspectives and eyes on that, right? And there's also shared responsibility.
Really insightful.
So I think from typically, like the boss, like pushing it to the end, like the CEO, like who's making literally the ultimate decision. Sometimes I think going to the extreme of doing low risk stuff they want to fail really, really slow. Because like, if you fail fast, like anybody in the team would want, like, if you see 99% of companies, when they're not innovating, they want to maintain the status quo. What is that? That's like failing really slow so that you aren't called out on it. Yeah, so, and that's what happens literally, that keep it going till it, so you can basically extrapolate downwards, just as failing fast would make you learn and iterate quicker and improve your processes and actually get somewhere. Right? Some of them, like, yeah, that's, I think, the logical conclusion to the converse of what this is.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you.
What I'd also like to add, kind of to Dr. Otterd's perspective, is like, what's the framework? With decisions, how many of you have had analysis paralysis? Just stuck. Exactly. Enough of us have gotten stuck in that analysis paralysis. So the key that we do right here is, yes, it's common sense to take a method and try it. If it fails, admit it, frankly, try another. But above all, try frickin' something. And that, I think, that fear, and when you have that fear of shame, how many organizations have actually imploded from a moderate mistake? I would guarantee you, probably that's a statistical anomaly. Not anomaly, but I'd say what, 10%, 5%? It depends on your regulatory. Hell, I'm in higher ed. We just lost 2 higher ed institutions here in the last 5 years. Concordia and Marylanders aren't anymore, and that sucks. But it wasn't until page 14 of their audit that somebody decided, oh, there's risk here. Yes, there was risk because it was low trust and it was hidden and it was hard to identify. But they tried to innovate. They tried and they failed. But is that really? Yes, 9 out of every 10 businesses fail to succeed beyond 5 or 10 years. But in all honesty, is that failure so huge that it's going to take you out? I worked at a healthcare organization. We had 72 different contracts. 72 different ways. We were all 97% Medicaid, but it came to us in 72 different ways. Everybody was afraid of failure because of one Medicaid audit that came back negative. You want to know what happened? Probation sucked. Got a very, want to know the great learned result from it? We got a very fiscally responsible organization that knew when they were going to make innovations, let's innovate at this one contract right here and then see if it applies to others instead of trying to innovate all 72. It allowed them to do bite-sized chunks. It allowed them to judge the value of that innovation. But it also helped release them of the fear that, no, we will still exist. We will still provide vital community health care, vital community behavioral health. And all this was enabled from a technological system that we finally got out of their way. So the fear of failure, the overconfidence, the groupthink, I mean, I love some of these things. Now I'm gonna steal the next one. How many of you have had the sunk cost fallacy? In other words, oh, we spent so much money on this, we gotta finish this thing. Oh, for the love of God. Okay, yeah. That one was probably the most expensive lessons I've had to learn. I pumped a bunch of money into this initiative for early on in my IT career. Oh my God, this is gonna give us a strategic differentiator. We're gonna get access to this information before the competition, like by a week. And this is during the real estate boom. And we're like, this is gonna make or break us. Yeah, I missed a critical detail. So once that thing finally went live, they're like, oh yeah, that price that you just spent, you know, that $25,000 in that investment, may sound small, but it was a small thing. Yeah, that's gonna happen monthly. No, we were supposed to make $50,000 off of this a year. This was a one-time start. No, it cost $25,000 per month. So I made a very big strategic tactical error. And like when I was pushing forward, we had to pay for it. Did it cost $25,000 in the end? No, it cost $75,000 to learn that lesson. But I wasn't ready to admit it. But I have now taken that lesson with me. And that failure was pretty hard. That was a good chunk of my very tiny IT budget at the time. But I have carried that lesson with me. Maybe it didn't help that particular organization, but it sure as hell helped a lot of the other organizations I got to work with afterwards.
Thank you, Brandon. So we move forward to a few of the takeaways related to decisions, some of the pitfalls, being aware of them, we want to avoid them. Love to have anybody, let's see, what hasn't been defined here. I think we talked, Brandon talked about a couple. What about analysis paralysis? Anyone want to offer an explanation of what that is?
That's exactly what just happened.
Everyone just froze.
It's like, anybody?
That was demonstrated just now.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. Not too hard about what you're about to say when you've been prompted in front of all 15 of your best friends. Yeah.
We never make a decision.
That's right.
What's that?
Decision by committee, like you sort of open to, like when you don't want to commit, you just open it up to the committee.
Right.
And then, It's not your fault anymore.
Sure, but you miss opportunities, the opportunities may have been presented if you had been able to make that decision more efficiently. Yeah, and potentially decision by committee, and that's almost another thing on this list, which is, that affects quality, because the risk, you try to make transfer the risk.
And I think there's one other thing that's maybe not captured is the cost of not doing something.
Yeah, I think, it's on this list. What's so interesting about like this whole thing is that we actually debated at great length on how to divide some of these thoughts up. And then because we've already covered the next like section of mistakes, right? Like we've already, because it's so interweaved, all these things are so like making mistakes, failing, trying to be better the next time. You're not always better the next time if you're at low. Hopefully when it's high stakes, you are better the next time. But like, all these are so interweaved. We actually debated at great length over White Claws and wine or something about how to present these in which order and when to do the next activity and which to list under decisions versus mistakes versus obstacles versus all the things. And so we've already kind of moved through some of the mistake slides as well with what someone just said.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
We should probably move forward here.
Yeah.
So we will. Mistakes was our third and final category. And we've got an exercise. We're going to wrap it up pretty quickly. Yeah, sorry.
As a strategist, any leader, we can build the best strategy out there. The problem is, how do you transform that strategy into actionable plan? Most importantly, what is your step number one and step number two? So looking at the list and looking kind of reflecting upon probably 20 years of my career, decisions are made, right? Whether it's made by a committee, a group of brilliant people, how do you transform it to the action? Meaning paper, words, to something that starts actually influencing change or making change interactions.
Thank you. That is largely the crux of it. Actually, we're going to touch on that about when we talk about commitment here shortly.
Yeah, and there's some good things up here, but I'm not going to read them, and I'm going to ask everyone to reflect for a minute inside, so you don't even have to share, or you can think about if you fed your dog or not. But what are some thoughts and feelings that arise when you make a mistake? And kind of imagine the different level of mistake for yourself, like the low mistake, the middle, the high, and what that initial gut reaction is like. I just cost someone $100,000, or I made someone feel like terrible garbage, or versus like, whoops, I misspelled something in the email, and just like kind of take 20 seconds. I know it'll feel like a really long time, but to reflect on what those different levels of feelings feel like, just a mistake level.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you. So we have a quote on mistakes. You may have heard or read this one before. Effing Steve always gets it right. Like anyone, he's wrong sometimes, but he insists. And not generally either. The people tell him when he's wrong. So he always gets it right in the end. That was said about Steve by Andy Grove, former CEO of Intel. We're going to have some panel discussion on this one. Honestly, I think so that we can focus on the exercises coming next, we should probably skip that part.
Yeah, I think, Travis, we talked enough about mistakes. We all have different size mistakes. I once took the wrong job, moved my family down south, and quit the day they got there with me because, dear God, this place sucked. Yeah, there have been some big mistakes that cost me professionally, but it put me on an amazing path and showed me what not to do.
And where are you now, right?
Exactly.
Which kind of takes us to.
Now, it's their mistake they hired me, but, at the place I'm currently at, but hey, they don't know that.
By the time they figure it out, you'll be long gone.
All done.
Yeah, so that actually is the first bullet that we had discussed, and the takeaway on this topic is that all of us have made mistakes, and we're almost still in this room. Turns out you're okay. Sergey was talking about SVB, and he's doing fine, even though SVB's been all over the headlines. A lot of us, I was at ZoomCare and laid off, which was super unexpected. It was supposed to be the next startup taking over the world, $1 billion valuation. It didn't work out, but it did work out. You know, maybe not at the moment, but not too long after. Some things about perspective, about resilience. We talked about that a little bit. Inaction breeds doubt and fear. That's part of a quote. I've got the whole quote in front of me, which is, I'm actually on the wrong slide because I'm forward so fastly. Is that one of our sponsors? I think that is. Fastly, yeah. Good job. Anyway, that was by Dale Carnegie. Inaction breeds doubt and fear. Action delivers results. I don't have the book at the moment, but it's true. And we recover and we get better. So let's move forward. I want to get to this exercise. This is the failure toss. On your tables, there are some sheets of white printer paper, and there should be some pens. What I want to ask you to do is take a piece of paper, turn it horizontally, draw a line down the middle, and title the left side of the paper failure, title the right side wisdom. In notation that is just for you, you're not going to share your failures. Write a few words to remind yourself of a few failures or mistakes in your own past. Professional, personal, doesn't matter. Next to it on the right, next to each failure, 2 or 3 failures you write down, try to think of some wisdom, lessons learned, the things that you changed moving forward. Go ahead and do that now. Again, you're not going to have to share your failures with anybody. We're going to be talking about the wisdom next. So I'll give you a few minutes.
Yeah, we'll give you about, 1 or 2 minutes. Let's take your time. There we go.
Where my failures go?
Left side is failure, right side is wisdom.
That's right.
Don't worry, you don't have to share it, unless you really want to share your.
Put it on the right side.
Actually, I'm going to use that opportunity to get some water. Next slide. As you're working on it, I did find that full quote from Dale Carnegie. It continues, if you want to conquer fear, do not sit home and think about it. Go out and get busy. So I'm going to look for eyes on me, and that means you're done. No rush, pressure. If I see lots of eyes, we'll move forward. All right, that's probably enough of a head start. So now take that paper, fold it in half along the line that you drew. So the failure side is on the bottom, and now you just got wisdom. There we go. Matt, can you share with others? No, I mean share. I won't call anybody out. You're welcome to share if you want to. Okay, so what we were going to do is have you share amongst each other at the table, but because the conversation has been so great, I would like to ask just volunteers if you're comfortable sharing just the wisdom. You don't have to tell us what those failures were, but we'd love to hear some of the lessons learned.
You have time to do the table.
Yeah, I think so. I have a no and yes.
Making the executive decision.
Okay, let's not. Thank you though. I appreciate it. This is all data. Next time we're gonna make more time. But for now, if I can see any hands, anybody who's comfortable sharing some of those lessons learned that we've written in front of you. It's written already.
Yeah, over here.
All right, please go ahead. You don't have to share them all. Just
for my first wisdom, I put build your own path, blaze your own trail, trust yourself.
Trust yourself. Yeah.
2 is work-life balance, work hard to check out and spend time with family.
Yeah, boundaries.
And 3rd is embrace failure and open up.
Embrace failure. Wow. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing. Sergey.
Very simple. Nobody's perfect. You will survive. You can. People are the problem and people are the solution.
You didn't hear that at the back. People are the problem and people are the solution. Thank you, Sergey. Yes, please. Yes, in the back. Thank you.
Wisdoms, let's see, wait until system is 100% functional.
Yes.
Take my time. Plan finances better, and stop eating and drinking excessively.
That's safe advice. Tonight accepted. You have a free pass. So go ahead. Yeah, please.
I think one of the key wisdoms or lessons that I learned is that the first step in overcoming a failure is to recognize that we have failed, which is like about understanding that it's time to stop and try something else. I think we talked about it elsewhere, but often it's a combination of the sunk cost fallacy and somebody's ego and somebody's reluctance to point out to the boss that, hey guys, we are on the wrong track. The sooner we recognize that, the better it is for us so that then we can move on to the next step, to whatever is needed to fix it. And the longer it festers, the worse it gets.
That's the truth. That's the truth. Very sad. Thank you. Couple more, yeah. Oh, please. In the back and then next.
I realized that my imposter syndrome was unfounded because I fought so hard to be seen in my work.
Yeah. Imposter syndrome unfounded because you fought so hard to be seen in your work. Thank you. Okay. I saw other hands.
Yes. Number 1, there's no such thing as total failure. You can always come back. Number 2, the right person comes into your life at the right time. And number 3, learning where your knowledge ends is how you find your brilliance.
Yeah, that's a great one. I think this is being recorded. Thank you for your service. Okay. I'm not saying other hands pop up. So we are going to come back to this sneak peek, but let's move forward. Okay, on the subject of commitment, we have a quote from Adam Grant. He's an author. He's also a professor at University of Pennsylvania, and I follow him on LinkedIn, and he's prolific. Let me tell you, I'm thinking about unfollowing him. He's very smart, but it's like reading a book every time I open LinkedIn. So the quote is, "Grit is not about persevering with a route that isn't working. It's about staying focused on a goal, but flexible on the path." I actually found this quote backwards because I had heard it's important to stay focused on where you're going, but be flexible on how you get there. And I was trying to figure out who said it from the slide. And I didn't find the original, but unsurprisingly, prolific Adam Grant had a great version we're going to use. Just any thoughts on this? I'm going to invite panel reactions to this, or anyone in the group who has either a personal story they'd like to share or agreement or disagreement with this concept.
I would completely agree. My undergraduate journey, so I graduated high school with a 1.6 GPA. Woo! Go And that took talent. And so through quite a bit of perseverance, mainly on my first date with my wife, we met in high school. She goes, well, this is where I'm going to school. What are you going to do? And I made a school up on the spot of where I was going to go. Lo and behold, I became a Viking after that. Go Portland State. And so they accepted me after academic probation. I wanted to be a physical therapist. So I was even going to go to Pacific University to be physical therapy. My grades were not good enough. And so I'm inpatient, doing all these dozens of hours of inpatient and outpatient volunteering in PT, and I walk in one day and I'm just miserable. And the physical therapist is looking at me and goes, it's prestigious to be here. What's wrong with you? Oh my God, I hate this. I hate this job. I'm going to hurt people. I hate everything about this. And I was so intent on just finishing that PT degree. I was focusing on that. She goes, that's not what college is for. If you're going to do college, it's to help you get the tools for your journey. So what do you like to do? I don't know. I like computers. Why don't you do that? No, it's my hobby. I don't want to do that. I wasn't ready to hear that yet. I graduated 6 months later with a speech communications degree. Why does that matter? I ended up graduating and getting a tool set with something that helped me solve problems and helped me communicate with people. The end goal, I thought, was become a physical therapist. No, the end goal eventually became, no, for me, just graduate, because in my family, that was a big deal. There's only been 2 other graduates out of 50 family members. And so getting there and re-recognizing that the goal was to graduate has opened up all kinds. My first IT job came from working, because I had a speech communications degree. They're like, well, you can talk to people on the end phone. Oh, dude, hire. And here we are 20 some odd years later, and now these poor schmucks have hired me to do other IT stuff for them at the university, and I love it. So don't focus on the path. And even your end goal can change, or you weren't looking at the right end goal. I was looking at a title. It was the wrong title. I needed the framework. I needed the flexibility. I needed the problem-solving tools that came from that end result.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a really good point to underscore. We're talking about commitment now. In a way, it's somewhat of an antidote to the first 3 things that we talked about. We're talking about commitment by an individual or a team to achieving success, not committing to an idea and doing it no matter what. That was some cost fallacy. And there's a couple of other cognitive biases related to that. It's about staying open and flexible, but persevering, continuing to work at it. I really see that Steve Jobs quote earlier as well. Okay, let's see. We've got a wrap up on commitment, which is, as I mentioned, it's kind of like the antidote. Committed teams overcome obstacles, correct past decisions, and recover from mistakes. Lots of ways to promote escape. Promote commitment, and I guarantee you that's a whole other 2-hour seminar. So, hi, so yeah, please.
So that last one right there, promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. Why is that vital for commitment? Because diversity of thought. I've worked on multiple teams where we had very diverse thoughts. We had talent that reflected the community we were serving. Our product was better because it was tailored to the communication channels, the communication styles. Without that, we would have failed. And it was that commitment to DEI. We ended up with a superior service in line, and our scores went through the roof. So I am a big fan of being committing to an ideal that, yes, you can improve these. And we committed to the DEI, and then we invested in those people to help them grow. And it was a wonderful opportunity, and it helped with their it was a mental health agency, so, and I learned it from some of this guy, so it was some cool stuff. I can go into more specifics on that if you want to take that offline, but I really wanted to point out some of these. The diversity of thought helps with commitment because it's hard, but the quality is awesome.
I want to create space for others on the panel. Any other thoughts related to trusting and empowering our teams, developing a shared vision and shared goals, or investing in people?
Well, I say, I think that holding on to that goal or the vision, it's like kind of like Brandon was saying, sometimes you think it's here, right? And maybe if you can keep zooming back, right? Like when you get, when there's obstacles or people are making mistakes, you're stuck, it's like expand, like the more you can expand the idea of what it is you're after, right? What's the next layer up, right? So like here, this is what we're trying, we gotta get, X, Y, and Z, we gotta get these things out. It's like, wait, is that what really matters? What's even more important than that? Like what's even bigger version of what we're trying to achieve? Every time you broaden that idea, then that team of diversity can help you see different channels and pathways and like, and then the other, like, there's the question somebody brought up, and it was one of the things we thought of before too, is like, part of that is, with commitment is how do you know when to keep going after it or like change directions, right? And I think that is the big question. And that depends a lot on what what any specific team is doing. But I think it really helps to see if this path is worth abandoning. It's like, if you can see if there are other paths, and every time you like zoom the focus back further, you get an opportunity to see if there are other pathways, right? Then it's easier to see if an obstacle is worth pushing up through or over, or if it's like, no, we should pivot and go another direction.
Thank you. Fascinating. Okay.
And I want to share one thing one of my 15-year-olds said in the last couple of weeks, because I'm still not totally sure commitment is the right insight here, really, but that's what the whole point of this is, like, to help just people like think, and reflect and give an hour to reflect instead of just listen to someone talk. But one of my 15-year-olds said about choir, and I know that my cost benefit to failing is a really different quotient to some viewers, but they said that choir is an art that doesn't happen without collaboration. And what I thought was really cool about that quote, from like a 15-year-old, full Gen Zer all the way, which is a whole other topic for another time, is how working with multiple generations over time. But is that I think there's a lot to be said about collaboration. And Shaya? Sasha. Okay, so, but alluded to that of like having a lot of eyes in the team, and that I have the S, but that collaboration is kind of key with some of these concepts of like that nothing so beautiful and great can happen without collaboration. And you have like the team, right? I just want to share that quote with you because it's from like a 15-year-old, and I was so appreciative of the scholarship information that you guys are raising money for. And I maybe hope that like someday there can be some like getting kids into some of these situations, because they have really smart stuff to say, and that you just could be blown away by it. Like, I didn't think like that when I was 15, like at all. Like, choir is an art that can only happen through collaboration. That's beautiful. And so I just want to share that with this level of commitment, because it's kind of the same, right? Committed and collaboration, they kind of work together in a way if they have that skill there.
Thank you. Okay, we have just a few parting thoughts. Obstacles build our resilience and improve our outcomes. Mistakes are far less of a threat than non-action. Decisions are a web of possible paths. There's more than one right way. Lots of ways to learn along that journey as well, and a committed team can overcome just about anything. So that's the end of our seminar today, but before you go, you all have that folded sheet of paper in front of you. I'd like to suggest that you unfold it, tear it along the line you drew at the middle, take the left-hand side, which was the failure side, wad it up, and toss it on the floor. I will pick it up and recycle it, and I promise I won't look. The other half, the half with the wisdoms, suggest you fold that up and stick it in your person wallet and take that with you. That's
Right.